I guess everyone is aware by now of the timeline of events which took place in China since 2010, and this pandemic or epidemic outbreak around the world. So we will not talk today about this, but I would like to talk to you about how can we, through dowsing, help ourselves to get out of this fearful state when a majority of people around us are just freaking out. So in order to do that, let's take one step back and look at this situation which takes place in our own body. So what happens? Well, to paint a bigger picture, I wanted to tell you that for last at least few years, I traveled to Europe to study what is called Germanic New Medicine with people who studied directly with Dr. Hammer. And I also finished the courses here with Ilse-Dora Laker, who is a protege of Dr. Hammer, and I'm lucky enough that she lives in Canada. But I also studied psychobiology over there and so on over there, which means in Europe. And so I do try to have as wide picture of the situation which takes in our brain, in our psyche, and in our body while we are sick, regardless of what we suffer for. And definitely today, according to GNM, Germanic New Medicine, we are going to biological conflict. But let's first look at the word conflict. What does that mean that we go through the conflict? We experience two types of conflicts in our life. One type of conflicts are psychological conflicts, and the other ones are biological conflicts. So what's the difference between them? Well, psychological conflict is when you go through the situation which, well, you have a rough idea how it will end, but you have to go through it and it's hard time for you. So let's say that a few years ago when my mom was diagnosed with cancer, we had a rough idea how it will end, and regardless of what I knew at that time and whatever, she would listen to me to a certain degree, and then she had her own opinion about it, what will happen with her. Now, I was going through psychological conflict, and all my family was going through for a few years through psychological conflict, because we had an assumption what will happen at the end, but we had to go through this process. There was no other way to, to avoid this. But we were prepared. So that's psychological conflict. It's very hard time, but you know what is the end effect. You just don't know when it will happen. Biological conflict is something else. It has to meet three requirements in order to happen. First, it has to be unexpected and fast. Second, it has to be heavy duty, which means traumatic. And third, it has to be lived in isolation. Now, what does that mean? Well, for example, someone calls and tells us that other person close to our heart died in car accident. It's fast, unexpected, and you talk to other people and you tell them, and they say, yeah, those things happens. I'm sorry, but it happens. Well, be happy that it happens fast and he that didn't suffer. Nobody understands you here. Excuse me. Nobody understands you. So in a sense, you go through it alone. Alone does not mean that you are on a deserted island and nobody is with you. Alone means that, in your opinion, you are left alone with this problem and nobody really understands what you are going through. And it doesn't matter if they understand or not, it's about how you feel. I feel alone, I feel isolated, therefore it's lived in isolation. When that happened, the emotion which struck you goes into your brain to specific relay in either primitive brain or midbrain or neocortex, new brain. Whichever relay is responsible for this type of emotions, it will hit this relay in your brain. Now the next is the reaction between your brain and your physical body, which means the impulse is sent to specific organ or tissue in your body in order to affect it, unfortunately. All right, so how can we deal with it? Those of you who had sessions with me often know that always I ask about your handness, which means, are you right-handed or are you left-handed? Because that will determine on which part of the brain, in which hemisphere of your brain, this specific trauma will correspond to specific relay in your brain. And then I ask about your, if I've never seen you and you just write to me, then I need to know your gender, or the person I will work on, gender. And also what is very, very important is hormonal state. Just because if a woman is before PMS, she will react differently on the brain level than the woman who is after PMS. And the same, of course, applies to men. So those three things will also decide how we will react to it. All right, so when we cover this very, very, very shallow but necessary information about how do we process whatever happens outside of our energy field events, then we can go into the kind of a core of it. So in every case of flu, men will react differently than women. So first of all, let's say this, that if the right-handed man or left-handed woman will be facing this type of conflict, which biological conflict, which we are going through as a whole humanity right now, then they will react with bronchi. Opposite to left-handed man and right-handed woman, because those will react with trachea, right here. And it's both are connected with fear, but it is either territorial fear or it is a fear also territorial, but women go through this type of fear differently because men are looking after territory, which means they are protectors of territory on which we live, which means a household, a community, a nation, and the whole world. Women are more about the house and family. So in Germanic New Medicine, those are called nest conflicts, all right? And those normally go into either bronchi or trachea, and it's normally fear with terror. So one could say, I'm speechless, or it left me speechless, or something like this. Now, Men react mostly with anger. Women, as we said, react more with fear. They are afraid about the young ones. They are afraid about how we can survive and so on. Now, when we are going into survival, there is another conflict which very often happens with other conflict, with primal conflict. And this is a conflict of kidney collective tubules, which means our kidneys are involved in the process. And then when kidneys are involved in the process, it means that we feel kind of like a fish thrown out of the water. We feel hopeless. And therefore, what we do is we hold the water. Because, of course, if you go through the desert, then you will not have, you know that you will not have much water. Therefore, you have to hold the water. Look at camel. That's right, it stores the water because it knows it will have to pass through the desert, and there will be possible no water. So they hold the water. We do absolutely the same, and therefore in our bronchi, for example, we can have additional mucosa. We can then afterwards we will cough it through the trachea, and so on and so on, and there is a swelling and all this, which helps us to remove this trauma, to remove a physical experience which we went through. Now, of course, as I said, it's a very, very brief look at what happens in our body. Either you're a man or a woman, either you're young or older, and so on. Now, why older people are more prone to get it? Oh, well, just because older people, first of all, worry more. Second of all, have many pre-existing conditions. And third of all, when we have children at home, children are now, majority of them, of course, I'm aware that some of them go through extreme trauma due to the abuse happening at home. But let's talk about the average home. Now, the children are home, they don't go to school, they can play or be in pajama for all day, and parents are with them. So it's really a paradise for them. They have no reason to get sick. So older people who worry for them can get sick, but so older people who care for them are possible. It is possible that they will get sick, but very, very rarely children are affected by it. So how do we deal with it? First of all, do not fear. And remember, I know some of you will say, oh, easy to say, I lost a job or I do not have money to live on. Yes, but you are smart. You got somehow this job. You built somehow this business. You can rebuild it because you do not only have the knowledge, but you also have an experience. So look ahead with positive attitude. I know it's an effort, but try to do your best to look with positive attitude into the future. Use this time to build on your dreams. How I would like to have this, what will happen to me after, who can I be, what can I do, how can I rebuild from the scratch, even if it will be from the scratch. But many of us will come back to our functioning business, which is on hold for some time. So use this time to invest in your talents, invest time in your talents, in your hobbies, spend time with your family, and have as much fun as possible. Watch movies you didn't have time to watch, read books which you didn't have time to read, and talk a lot with your friends through Skype, through Zoom, through telephone, whatever platform or media will get, but get closer to others. Do not isolate yourself psychologically, and supply yourself with energy. So what we can do first, of course, we can clear ourselves from all the negative thoughts, negative influences, and so on. And then if you experience any pain, you can of course release the pain through mere ices by saying release the pain, and whenever this pain is, and wait until the pendulum will stop. And then what you can do is either you have a pendulum working on gold light or white light. You can take the pendulum over your hand, hold it on your wavelength, and say through the vibration of gold, balance my whole energetic system. So I will be, or continue to be, happy, joyful, and healthy. And you just simply wait until it will stop. I didn't want to say it before because I didn't want to give the request for the pendulum to stop working. Work this way on your whole family, on your friends. I know, let's put aside for a moment the permission issue. And if you can, clear your friends and heal your friends in a sense of supplying them with energy. You don't push anything on them, you just make the energy available for them. So they can take it or not, but mostly everyone will take it, will absorb it, and will get a little bit more positive. And little by little, we can rebuild our energetic system, rebuild the level of our energy to the point which no flu, no epidemic, nothing will affect our body, and we will stay healthy, happy, and in your optimal health.